Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the QRL Show, the place where you come for the crypto and stay for the quantum. A little bit different scenario or setting here. We're both together in an environment to have a short episode. Michael, today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of being post-quantum native. Today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of being post-quantum native, or maybe some of the advantages of a project being post-quantum native. A lot of people hear about, well, when a certain blockchain gets to a certain point, they'll do this or they'll do that. But could you maybe first off, as a two-part question, define what being post-quantum native is, and maybe we can get into a couple follow-up questions on some of the advantages or reasons why you would want to be post-quantum native, especially as this quantum threat keeps nearing in the coming years.
So if you're a post-quantum native chain, that means essentially your first block since Genesis is post-quantum secure. In other words, you don't have any elliptical curve cryptography in the digital signature algorithm. You don't have any in the code. You don't have any cryptographic vulnerabilities that could be compromised by a cryptographically irrelevant quantum computer. So the advantage being is that there's no migration, there's no strategies that need to get formed, there's no committees that need to get formed, there's you don't have to go through this migration process. And as some of the content, I'm not sure if it's been released yet, but one of the main points that we're going to be driving forward is that with all of the post-quantum migration strategies, and this is agnostic across blockchains, we came up like 7 or 8 that we have on list, that all users have to do something with all of the proposed solutions. And this is across all mainstream strategies. So the biggest advantage is that there is no user transaction that needs to be performed. And if there's no user transaction that needs to be performed, that means that you don't have this risk of confiscation of property asset ownership. You don't have to have narratives around creative wording around as what is a lost coin or obviously an abandoned coin. There's no wordplay or creativity that needs to be around it, because you're just post-quantum secure since the first block, and that's it. And in all honesty, this is the purest form of post-quantum security. So one of the advantages of not being post-quantum secure since the first block is it gives you the ability to do classical DeFi, which helps with going on a Uniswap or PancakeSwap or whatever classical DeFi system you want. However, it's at the cost of post-quantum security, because you eventually have to take all of those legacy coins and migrate them over to an L1. And QRL's taken a different approach. We created the first government-grade post-quantum secure blockchain that's post-quantum secure since the first block, using NIST grade cryptography. And the cost of that is that we don't yet have that interoperability back into classical DeFi. However, with our QRL 2.0 and our Zond hard fork, we'll be able to build some of that in now. So there is no stress, there is no conversation, there is no creative wordplay, no organizations need to be formed. There are no lost assets. There's no property confiscation. All of those problems don't exist when you're post-quantum secure since the first block. And there are probably, to my knowledge, there are only 2 real projects that are actually doing this, and ours is number 1.
Yeah, and no, it's huge, because it's one of those things where there's so many, there's obviously the balance between other projects saying, well, we could do this down the road, or we could maybe do a little bit of this tweak or that tweak, but
nobody talks about the costs.
And all the ones that we've talked about, even if there's some strength or, hey, there's something novel in this, there's still going to be some aspect of it that's they could run into an issue with that. And also then humans are complicated. There's the people manually having to do something.
The narrative on that is the narrative on that is blockchain will upgrade like any other cryptographic system, and a lot of corporations will be referenced, government system will be referenced. These are all corporate centralized entities with dedicated static IT firms that all have to agree and reach consensus. It's not a distributed global consensus problem. So when a lot of projects say, "Oh, we've got this handled," or "We're working on a plan," or A, B, or C, they'll say we have this and we're working on it and we have a plan, but they don't talk about the costs of what that plan will eventually mean, which eventually comes down to some sort of property confiscation or ownership. So one of the things that you heard probably about 2 weeks ago was CZ floated the proposal of confiscating Satoshi's Bitcoin. This like just a few years ago, this conversation would have been unprecedented, and it did erupt in an uproar within the Bitcoin community of those that are aligned with the original ethos and philosophy of Bitcoin. However, you also have a group of people that are more concerned with, okay, I don't care what the costs are. We just need to make sure that Bitcoin is secure. We're gonna cut off a leg or an arm if we need to, and we're just gonna make this work. But the problem with that is that a lot of those opinions, and this is my opinion, may not reflect those of the team or the rest of the broader X community, as it usually doesn't. However, what happens is that once you start making those compromises, you start to set a new precedent as to what blockchain philosophy means, whether or not confiscation by even democratic on-chain voting, if that's an acceptable solution or not. But in the history, like, nobody's ever talked about confiscation of coins. It used to be not your keys, not your crypto. Well, now it's not your fork, not your crypto. And that was a founding principle. Not your keys, not your crypto, not your node, not your rules. Right? So.
And now it's even to the point where even every week, every month, if someone would have said, hey, someone that notable or tied to a certain exchange or project would even publicly say that, some of those conversations would happen in private, but now it's getting just brought to the mainstream. So
it is, but you also watch, and I'm not gonna give my own take on these, but look at who's saying these things and map those across incentives and where resource allocations are, and you'll start to understand the pillars of Bitcoin ideology. You'll start to see the ideologists, you'll see the purists, you'll see the capitalists, you'll see the corporate interests. And if you were to ask me, even today, if you were to ask me what I think the biggest threat to Bitcoin is, I still would not quite answer it as a quantum computer threat. Right now, I think there's a more subversive attack on the consensus of the protocol itself, and how decisions are made and how incentives are aligned. And this goes deep into like the dev community and a bit cloak and dagger stuff, but those are my own personal opinions. So I think, but the two biggest, just to add on to your question, I think the two biggest risks to Bitcoin right now are moving forward with proper consensus protocols. BIP 10.110, I think it's coming. It's gonna hit the block in like three weeks or so. Hasn't got a lot of support. It's got like less than 1% mining support. But consensus and moving forward with the protocol in a way that makes sense, that benefits all users, which I think is going to become increasingly more and more difficult by moving the protocol forward. I'm of the opinion just it was good as it is. Just let it be. If it were not for this quantum threat, and the quantum threat is obviously the secondary major concern that I have. And one other thing too that I want to add to the talk is that one of the reasons we have the quantum threat in the first place is because of Bitcoin's immutability, being able to replay all of the transactions since the beginning of 2000, 2008, 9, and be able to verify those transactions for yourself. Well, some of those transactions were written with classical quantum computer vulnerable cryptography, and they're still sitting there. So the core problem being, what do you do with these coins that will not be migrated? Because you can bolt on a post-quantum secure solution onto Bitcoin.
Yeah.
However, having the DSA there, and you've heard me say this before, a post-quantum secure DSA does not a post-quantum secure blockchain make. In other words, you have the option, but not everyone will migrate. You can quote me on that. It's on the video. But not everyone will migrate to post-quantum security. There will have to be losses made. There will have to be compromises made, and these compromises have the potential to rewrite blockchain philosophy, principles, ideologies, and I don't think that the Bitcoin we have right now will be the same Bitcoin we have in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and this just ties to, we've obviously touched on Bitcoin here, but you fill in other projects and talk about the same scenario of how it plays out from going to a pre-post-quantum world to a post-quantum world, and a lot of the hairy, messy problems in the middle. Looping back as just a final loop out of the being post-quantum native from the very beginning. If you're viewing this, obviously, check out the QRL.org. We have other videos, as Michael just alluded to. We have a video that we just had, which was with Dr. Joseph Kearney, post-quantum cryptography expert, that we covered a handful of zero knowledge proof, abstraction, like the different approaches that some of these different projects are publicly saying, hey, this is going to be our approach to the quantum threat. So if you're interested in diving further in any of those, we have a video on there. We're going to have a blog guide that goes through each of those routes as well upcoming. But any last thoughts just on the post-quantum native part? I think maybe a best place for people to start. Obviously, the QRL.org is a good one.
Do your own research. Look a few layers deep rather than just what the surface level narratives are, and you'll really start to see some of the contention among the developers, the miners, and the Bitcoiners, not just on the consensus moving forward itself, but what post-quantum actually means. And there is no way to go to just take a sanitized, purist approach migration to classical blockchain to a post-quantum security without taking some heavy losses. There's just no way to do it for 99.9% plus of blockchains because of the immutability, which was one of Bitcoin's key innovations, was being able to replay those transactions. It did a great job. Some of those in a lot of altcoins followed that same style with ECDSA, classical transactions. But now that we're moving in this post-quantum world, it's changing all that. And you don't even have to really believe what we're saying. Governments, corporations, everyone is moving forward with post-quantum security. So whether or not you believe or you don't believe they're real, they're unicorns, it doesn't really matter because this is where the industry is migrating. In perhaps, let's call it 8 to 10 years, you won't even see, I predict you won't even see quantum cryptography. It'll be the new standard. It'll just be classical cryptography in the same way pen and paper through mechanical cryptography, through all of the different types of iterations of cryptography, integrated circuitry, and then CPUs. And then they eventually, everything eventually just ends up as classical, and I think you'll see the same thing with quantum.
Yeah. Well, hey, there's a lot more of that. And until the next episode, Michael, appreciate you touching on,
thanks.
First off, post-quantum native, what that means, a little bit about what the QRL is all about. And for those viewing, make sure, if you don't already subscribe, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Visit theqrl.org. Check out our YouTube channel. Michael and I have continuous videos that we keep putting out all around the topic. We've been doing so for years. And until the next video, make sure to keep those digital assets post-quantum secure. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.